Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's actually evening time here in the United States. I am Carla from Rehan Alawalla's World of Connections, and I am speaking with Andy Kay, who is in Melbourne, Australia, and it's morning time for him. And
It's
we had,
yeah,
yeah, it's morning there, and
and
we're
it's
going.
rainy and it's winter, so we're at the other end of the planet.
And here it's turning into summer and it's warm and sunny, except the sun is about to go down. So there's a lot of differences that we're going to find, but basically, we're going to talk about education. Andy is an educator for a long time and has programs going throughout the world, from what I understand. We'll find out in a moment. I want to also tell you that this show, like all of the shows, is is promote is sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which is an online organization promoting peace, one conversation at a time. Andy, can you please introduce yourself?
Unmute. There we go. Hi, I'm Andrew Kay. Most people just call me Andy. I'm the CEO and founder of the World Literacy Foundation, based here in Melbourne, Australia. Married with 4 children, 2 grandchildren, and I've been running the organisation, the World Literacy Foundation, now for about the last 10 or so years. Thanks, Carla.
Can you tell me about the foundation and what you do with the foundation, please?
So the World Literacy Foundation is a peak global literacy not-for-profit organisation. We do a variety of things. Ultimately, our main focus is to be working towards the eradication of illiteracy by 2040. You may be aware that in the world, there's about 800 million people that can't read a single word. There's another 2 billion people that struggle to read a sentence. So whether a person is completely illiterate or has low-level literacy, it has a significant impact on their life, both now and in the future. Their inability to read a medicine label, their inability to fill out a job application. It has significant impact for them in the continuation of education to improve themselves and their income earning capacity in life. So the World Literacy Foundation seeks to, one, create awareness globally that this is a significant issue and we need to work better together to reduce the levels of illiteracy. And we offer a variety of programs, particularly in the more vulnerable, disadvantaged parts of the world that have the greatest need to try and reduce the levels of illiteracy. So we do a variety of things, bringing technology and books, and in places where there are no books and where there is no technology. And the final thing is that we are an organisation that facilitates the wider literacy community to come together, to talk and to collaborate, to network and to build ideas. So every 2 years we facilitate the World Literacy Summit, which is at Oxford University, and it's a time where people who are working in the field, be it practitioners, heads of NGOs, academics, researchers, government, intergovernment bodies, all coming together for a conference and building better networks and collaborations together. More recently, like with the pandemic, we've moved to an online forum rather than meeting face-to-face, which has been wonderful because it's opened up this community of literacy specialists to more people who ordinarily wouldn't have been able to come to Oxford University. So, I mean, in a brief nutshell, that's who we are.
Let's take it out of let's take the nut out of the shell and begin talking about it more. What made you so passionate about working with illiteracy and getting the world more literate globally?
So for me, the driving factor to start the organisation, there were three significant things that happened. The first thing was in early 2000, I spent about 4 years travelling through Africa, mainly Kenya, East and West Africa, and often out of the big cities and into the regional areas and the rural towns. And as an educator, I went to literally hundreds of classrooms, and I found classrooms that were void of books, empty of any books and educational resources, realising that some of the highest levels of illiteracy were and are in the sub-Sahara region of Africa. I mean, that really struck me. I realised if at the very basic level, if we're not providing books and educational resources to classrooms, there's little chance that we're ever going to address this issue. So that was one significant thing that happened to me that stimulated the establishment of the organisation. The second is my eldest son, Trent, who's 34 now. He is illiterate. He went through the school system with a significant learning disability, and still to this day, he really cannot write a single word. Although I've seen him use technology like voice-activated texting to communicate, and he's found solutions to overcome barriers of the illiteracy he faced. So particularly, there are a large number of children who have learning difficulties and dyslexic type behaviour and other type disabilities that they struggle significantly with the ability to read and write, but yet they find solutions themselves often to manage. And the third thing was my grandfather, Charlie Kay, was a farmer in Tasmania, which is southern part of Australia, and had 2 years of education. And he learnt to read in his adult life. And I guess I've really seen, for those people who struggle to read, even though school has passed them, in their adult life, they can overcome the barriers of illiteracy. And so they were the three significant things for me that led to the establishment of the organisation. My experiences in Africa, my experience with my son, and the knowledge of my grandfather and overcoming illiteracy in his adult life.
Can we talk about your son a little? How did he get through school if he couldn't read and write? Now,
Yes.
I taught learning disabled children, so it sounds like it was a learning disability. And there are ways to teach these children to read and write and be successful. So I'm wondering about it.
Yeah, with Trenny, it was picked up really his early childhood development was well behind, probably at about age 3. And so he was a late developer in all aspects of early childhood. And I guess, sometimes boys are, and he had a sister that's 14 months younger, and Ashley, she had really passed Trent in his development, probably by age 4. In the first stage of school for him in primary school, he struggled. He received very little support there. They just thought he maybe will grab things a little bit later in life. There wasn't, he was shipped around to various specialists, from pediatricians to psychologists through to specialists in dyslexic dysphasia and other sort of type learning difficulties. And although there wasn't a clear diagnosis to say, this is why he's struggling to grasp, he really struggled through primary. When he went to secondary school in the Australian system, for certain subjects, Trent had what they call an integration aide, which was a specialist teacher by his side, but particularly with subjects like English and maths and some of those more analytic type subjects. So he had pretty well one-on-one support through high school, and he finished or completed year 12. And I guess he was drawn naturally to doing practical things like working with his hands, and that's the job that he's doing today. But as far as overcoming that barrier for him to learn to read, the school system per se never found a solution. And I guess, when now we're talking back, he was at school 15 or so years ago. A lot of the knowledge and in the sector has changed a lot in the last 15 or so years. So, but yeah, Trent as an individual, he's pretty comfortable within his own skin. He just, regardless of these barriers of literacy, it hasn't affected his self-esteem, and he manages to cope. He uses internet banking and uses like his smartphone to communicate, and occasionally he will have issues that he needs to get some support with to understand how to navigate through. But yeah, digital literacy for most children, and now young adults that have low-level literacy skills, seem to use the phone, navigate through the phone in a basic way, because particularly with most smartphones, they have tools there to help, be it a smiley face or a thumbs up, but there are tools there to communicate that can allow a person with low-level literacy skills to manage. Yeah. Sorry, just on mute there.
I hate this so much. I forget myself. Using technology. When did he start using technology in his normal school day in order to be successful in his work?
Yeah, Trent started to use technology really as the smartphone became available. So he's now 34, and the smartphone has been with us for about 14 years. So when he was at school, the only phone that was available was the old sort of analog, like the Nokia type phone. And as the newer version of a smartphone has developed, that has actually really helped Trent to be part of and having the ability to communicate to others, because he's figured out, as I mentioned earlier, how he can talk into his phone and have the phone write a text message for him, or how he can cut and paste something that he sees and pass that on. So it's a great example of digital technology has really been a fantastic support for him, in life, and to manage and to navigate through, both work and play. Yeah.
How did he navigate through school during that time? Because there wasn't, the use of technology really did not exist at that point.
Mm-hmm. So I guess, yeah, he did have integration aid support through those more difficult subjects. But I guess at school, they guided him towards classes relating to what we call in Australia trades. So it's more working with your hands. So he did carpentry and other type sort of courses at school, preparing him for a job working outdoors. So he naturally enjoyed, working with his hands and horticultural type work. Today, he works at the school that he went to, and he's the head of the maintenance department. So he manages a team of 4 people, and they basically, it's a school of 2,500 students, about 400 staff. And if something breaks, either Trent gets someone to fix it or he fixes it himself. So there's always, in a big school community, there's always things being built and changed. And within the school system today, if a teacher goes into a classroom and the electricity doesn't work, there's an app within the school system that the teacher logs a job to say, yeah, the electricity isn't working. Trent would get that text message, and he sort of figures things out. So we were talking, with him, like technology is always changing, and there's certainly every year there's newer technology that can help him do things, previously that he couldn't have done. So I think the great thing with someone like Trent is that regardless of these barriers of illiteracy, he's kept a positive mind, and he's okay to accept new challenges and to be stretched a little bit. So that's a great thing for him, just to have that positive attitude and not allow it to really get him down.
A positive attitude is obviously so very important. And you said when you began as an educator, was your focus on literacy, or where was it when you first began?
Yeah, I actually started out in journalism, which is the use of words. I started at college in the United States, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and although I don't have the American accent, but I found myself really drawn to communication and journalism, and which is the use of words. I returned after my degree, came back to Australia, got a job as a journalist in a radio station, just basically covering the local news of that community. And Then migrated into the not-for-profit sector, and then I did a second degree in marketing at Monash University here in Australia, and that prepared me for, if you like, administration and management of the working in the not-for-profit sector. So as in my role, you know, I have projects and teams and people all over the place, and a lot of it really is administrative. It's coordination. I am, as a person, entrepreneurial. I enjoy challenges. I'm excited that in this 21st century and with the use of technology, you know, we can do so much and, you know, be speaking to someone in Washington, DC, like we are now. Years ago, in my state where I live, one of the programs I used to do was running a youth week for young people in the city where I live, and we would bring young people together, and just it was empowering them to have a voice in the community. But in today's world with digital, we can do things online, and we don't just need to do things in our local city. We can do things nationally and internationally, and I never had that opportunity to do those type of things 20 years ago, where today we do. Like, as an example, for us as an organisation, we have what we call a youth ambassador program, where we have young people who are literacy advocates in their local communities, in their schools, in their universities, on behalf of our organisation for a term of 1 year. At the moment, there's 2,500 literacy ambassadors, like all over the globe, who receive training from us. There's 5 modules of training, and we equip them, empower them, and deploy them out in their local communities to, if you like, turn up the volume on the importance of literacy in their schools and universities. 20 years ago, we couldn't have done that, but today we can. We can link the world together. We can breed, you know, communication, collaboration, cultural exchange, young people working together, whether you're on the East Coast, the West Coast of Africa, Latin America, Australia, United States, Europe, wherever, does not matter, you know, and young people dearly love opportunities to be part of a wider global community. Plus, the advantage of these youth ambassadors are that they're doing community service, they're involved and, you know, connecting with their communities, they're out there speaking, running activities. So that's where, like, this digital age of the 21st century has just opened up so many more doors for people who are entrepreneurial, and these doors weren't available to walk through, you know, 15 or 20 years ago.
Now, when you started this, you started it about 10 years ago, and the internet was just beginning, and this type of conversation did not happen. Was your goal to be on the internet? What was your goal originally?
I'd love to say that I knew, you know, 10 years ago what the internet, you know, could do for us. And like most people, it became something new. And it was like, yeah, since we're an organisation now, we better have a website, and, you know, we better have social media presence. And gradually, as technology has evolved, we've tagged these things on, where I think the shift really over the last sort of 5 years or so is really to make technology more center of your organization and not an add-on, where I think in the early days of the World Literacy Foundation, a website per se was just an optional extra, where and now it's central, and digital activity is central to the way that we do things. So that's where it's radically changed all of us and the way that we do our activities. I'd like to say that I was predicting those sort of changes, and that's not the case. I guess I was excited to learn as I grew and developed to understand the immense opportunities that digital can bring to all of us as a global community, both in, you know, bringing about dialogue and learning from others around culture and language and background and experience, which is all about bringing acceptance and peace. So yeah, look, it's been an interesting journey. I don't know where it will finish, but certainly I love the opportunity that as an organisation our scope of operations, you know, can be global. We can do a Zoom conversation with 2,000 people on it together, although everyone can't speak at the same time. But who would have ever thought, you know, 3 years ago that you could bring, you know, several thousand people together on a Zoom call and have this conversation? You know, I thought at very best maybe with Skype we could have 1 or 2 people, but not thousands. So technology is you know, radically changing the way that we do things, and certainly for groups like ourselves that have these very high aspirational goals to make a meaningful impact, to work towards the eradication of illiteracy by 2040. Suddenly now I'm seeing, hey, that is actually possible. You know, I think the growth that we're seeing in the digital area, the way that we can be inclusive to people regardless of geographically, you know, where they're located, that is there now, where a few years ago that wasn't possible. The world is definitely, you know, becoming connected via digital, be it by phone or computer or whatever.
Knowing what you know now, you told me you had 40 people working for you, and I assume they're all working on some type of technology. Can you explain what they're doing and how it's helping the world become less illiterate?
Yeah, one of our main, I spoke about the youth ambassadors, I spoke about the World Literacy Summit. One of the key programs that we do is, it is called Some Books. If people want to just go to somebooks.org, they can see lots about it. But what it is about is providing digital content, educational digital content, preloaded on a 10-inch tablet device with a solar panel charger. So, and classrooms that are off the grid, meaning classrooms where there's no internet access or limited internet access, and no electricity, can still be connected with the digital age. So that's predominantly in sub-Saharan Africa, where the highest rates of illiteracy are, and we provide a 10-inch tablet device with 700 books preloaded on the device, plus educational content. So regardless if there's internet there or internet's not there, children can still use these digital tools to learn how to read. The books are often in local language and bilingual, so they're not books that we just collect randomly, like from around the world, but they're books that have been in the most created for and by that local community. So our focus is those that are most vulnerable, those that are off the grid or have limited access, and they're the ones that are predominantly the most illiterate in the world. They're the ones most vulnerable. They're the ones that lack any access to basic learning tools and resources and books. So our program, Some Books, is specifically focused on those countries. So at the moment, we're working in Uganda, Kenya, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Nigeria, in classrooms in those countries, providing these tablets. Now, sometimes in some communities, the tablets can be taken to the local Wi-Fi. There might be a hotspot somewhere in the community, and the tablet can sync with Wi-Fi and upload. But for many of these communities, and for those people that have travelled through those countries that I've mentioned, know that, yeah, once you drive out of the big cities and you drive into the regional areas, you're lucky if you've got internet. And if you do have internet, it's often very slow and very low bandwidth. So the Some Books tablet, with all this content, can offer students in a classroom very rich content in quality, regardless of bandwidth and speed. So it's providing or bridging the gap of giving children the opportunity to have access to 21st century technology and content, regardless of where they are. The book building software that we use, called Tendril, is a very simple and easy to use software. So as an example, in those local communities, if they wanted to create a local book, you know, using their smartphone with WhatsApp, they can create a sound file or take a picture, and and record something in local language, local dialect. And through that, and sending it just via WhatsApp, we can incorporate those pictures, those videos, those sound files into the creation of making local books. And it's very simple to do because it's just a drag and drop scenario. So the important thing is that we're creating local books in local language with stories of local communities, which obviously has far greater impact because it's not some book shipped in from wherever in the world. It's their own book. And we certainly, the other point I'd really make is we find in a lot of most of the communities that we're working, for many of the children, it's the first time that they've touched technology. And that level of engagement as children for the very first time in their life use technology, it's amazing. It has an incredible impact. We just take it for granted that we can pick up a phone and touch technology all the time. And the feedback that comes from the schools are children who had lost interest in learning because there weren't any books, because they were in a large classroom and they were sort of a little bit lost, are becoming engaged in learning again because of Some Books. So it's that retention of children in that learning journey, particularly in those vital early years. The technology is exciting kids to continue to learn, and children certainly are very inquisitive. You know, when they see technology for the first time, they touch and wonder, you know, how did you get all these sort of people inside this tablet, and how does that work? So Some Books is a wonderful program, and that's those 40 people that I spoke about there, people that we have around the place who are working in the field, working with school teachers, giving them support and training in how to use the tablet, how to use the content, and implement the devices within their classrooms.
Wow, that is wonderful. So all 40 of those people are working on Some Books, that project. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And
Yes.
how long has Some Books been in existence?
How long Some Books has been in existence? For about 7 years now. Although, just like we've spoken about how technology constantly changes the way that we do things, certainly even within Some Books, we are constantly changing. So as an example, when Some Books first started, we were predominantly just tablet. The only way children could access books is via the tablet. And now we're moving into children accessing local language content on a specific app, so they can actually read via a smartphone at home. So in many parts of the world, smartphones are becoming more available, and there are cheaper versions of smartphones that people are using. So there's a rapid growth of use of smartphones in poorer and isolated sort of communities around the world. So 5 or so years ago, smartphones weren't available in many of these places, and now they are becoming available. So within Some Books, we're linking both tablet and apps that can be accessed by smartphones together. So children can access extra books and material after school at home via a smartphone. Again, most people realise that once you go to many parts of the world that are more off the grid, the bandwidth, the phone technology is slow, and sometimes it can be to access data is fairly expensive. So that can be a barrier that can stop people with their ability to access educational content, where with Some Books, all the educational content is preloaded on the device. So there's no additional cost to a classroom, to a school, to a teacher to continually access that material day in, day out.
Do you find that a lot of the kids are really engaged in this? It seems, especially since the pandemic, this seems like an excellent way to get kids engaged in learning who originally may not have been engaged. And how many students have you influenced already?
Definitely, particularly in countries like America, Australia, and possibly in Europe, the UK, for children using too much digital, in some situations, there are a little bit of pushback that parents are putting time limits that children, spend on their phone or spend on their tablet. But in developing and emerging countries, digital is new, and there is this absolute huge appetite for people to have their very first digital experience. And digital is quite unique, where in the old days we'd print a children's book. It might have come from somewhere else in the world and it was one book for everyone, where as I've sort of already described, with digital, it's very easily to contextualize a book to a local language. It can be bilingual. The photos, the stories, the imagery, the videos, the gamification, like that's another really interesting part where you can read a book, and then once you complete the book, there can be a little game that can be sort of a drag and drop game or a numbers game that continues the learning process in another way, which is really engaging with people. So with children, there's sounds and there's activities. So the impact of that is far greater than often just a hard copy book. The numbers for us with some books is roughly about 30 or so thousand children impacted. So it's significant, but it's not massive. There are other organisations doing similar type things, but a little bit different, that have probably greater impact. For us, with some books, I'm not sure, some people may know Tobias Harris. He's a basketball player with the 76ers that at the moment are having their playoffs in American basketball, and he's one of our major supporters for some books. So it's wonderful that Tobias gives us significant funds to fund that program in Africa. So we're really blessed and fortunate to have someone like Tobias to not just give us supportive words, but dip into his own pocket to help buy tablets every year. He buys, I think it's about 500 tablets for the organisation. So which is wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, we're looking forward to growing the program into more countries and more schools. So it's just, step by step.
I want to learn so much more from you, but I know that I've kept you beyond your time already. Would you mind speaking with me more?
Yeah, no, love to.
Explaining your program?
Love to.
Because the Ministry of English is supposed to be bringing in English literacy, having children begin to speak more, not only children, but adults in English, and feeling more comfortable. And I think you have something that everyone needs to know about, and also how you are using technology is so very important. And I don't want to impose upon you. I feel like I've imposed enough on you today that I don't want to keep you any longer. But how are you doing time-wise?
Yeah, no, that'd be fine. I mean, I could also bring in an extra guest or two, and we can give a focus on the youth ambassador program, or have a program that just focuses in on some books. So, or a program that just focuses in on the World Literacy Summit. So, more than happy to continue the discussion, but maybe focus more specifically on one of the arms of the organisation and what we're doing. That would be fine.
That would be absolutely wonderful. So why don't we, I've already kept you long enough today. Why don't we plan on doing that offline when we get off, just start a thought about it? And what words of wisdom would you like to leave our audience with right now?
Yeah, I would really just leave people realizing you're never too old to stop learning, that lifelong learning can happen regardless of where you're geographically located. regardless of your age. But it's all, up here, and it's all the attitude that for each of us to be open to change and to embrace change in a positive way. That certainly we've spoken a lot today about the digital age and how that is impacting all of us and quite rapidly. And I guess the challenge for all of us is to accept it and be part of it, and see so many wonderful things that have come out of it and will continue to come out of it in future years.
I am very, very excited to speak more with you, Andy, and maybe we can talk a few moments off the line. And I want to remind everyone that this show is sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which is an online organization promoting peace one conversation at a time. And can we wave goodbye? Bye, everyone.